This is SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. I am joined today by the Senior Director of Customer Education and Certification and Content Services for Procore Technologies, Michael Lux. Michael and I actually had have got to know each other a little while ago. We tried to do this once before, and we ran into some technical issues, and glad to have you back. Unfortunately, as a result, it means that my co-host Casey, when we were scheduled to get Michael on the phone, is driving to Montana. So it means that it's just me and you today, Michael, but glad to have you on the show. Welcome to SaaS Therapy.
Thanks, Todd. And I'm sorry I chased Casey away. No, really glad to be here. And glad we worked through the technical difficulties, whatever the heck those were. But yeah, really happy to be here. Excited to talk to you and your listeners.
Pumped to have you as well. You know, Michael, Procore, maybe it'd be helpful since maybe help people understand a little bit more about you, your background, and the company that you work for as we get ready to jump in here.
Yeah, for sure. So just a little bit about me. I've been in the enterprise software space for 27 years. Started back in client server days with a company called PeopleSoft. Got into the industry as a trainer. I had expertise on a business side with higher ed. There was software, they needed expertise. It was a good match. And then I just kind of took off from there, really found a great lane and a great home in enterprise, enterprise software education. Moved up to be, running a P&L, building organizations from scratch. Kind of went from, as we got into the internet age, I worked with, I went overseas for a while and did some worked at Computer Associates, a big company called Infor, VMware, which is pretty big, sort of SaaS virtualization company. And then ended up here at Procore. And, just a little bit about what I do. I run the content side of things, education, certification, documentation, knowledge management, really content that's needed to, set up, configure, use, optimize large software systems. I've been with Procore for 3 years. Procore is an awesome company. We have a single vertical, which is the construction market. So we only serve construction. We have an end-to-end platform that goes from design all the way through to like ribbon cutting, I guess you could say. And we've been around for quite a while, about 20 years, was used to redo the Panama Canal. That's kind of one of the claims to fame.
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, it's exciting. And I've been here for 3 years to really pivot to post-IPO enterprise and scale up. And so I've been working with a great team and a great portfolio of content, but really trying to get it into a more, sort of built for purpose, current state, best in class situation, whatever words you want to throw around, just get it to where it needs to be. And that's been interesting. And along the way, I've learned a lot of stuff. And I think some of which we'll talk about today.
Yeah, I love that. It's interesting for me because Procore is a name that I hear a lot and for customers in the construction space because you're kind of the I don't know if I would say you're gold standard. Maybe you would. I would say that's true, right? You're one of the major players in that space, and super cool to see how you work with customers. Maybe I'd be curious to get a sense, Michael. What is in your role in education? How is that structured at Procore? Like, where does your team sit? Is it like part of support and customer success? Is it part of marketing, or is it like where and how does your team sit within the org?
It's a great question, and it changes. So when I first came to Procore, we were sitting in the product and technology org, engineering, product development, whatever you want to call it, the product org, right? Mm-hmm. And that made sense for the so I have documentation, education, and then a content services team. So it made sense for documentation, but education, content services, not as much, right? And so we were moved out of product education into professional services, right? So I sit now in our revenue, customer success, professional services, as you look at it hierarchically. And with professional services, we make sense for education and content services, but documentation isn't exactly a square peg, square hole. I think that, it's a great question because what it points to is that content doesn't exactly live in one place. It touches a lot of parts of the company. It touches the customer a lot, which I know we're going to talk about. And so we could sit in a number of places. I think what's important from a leadership perspective, and this is where I think I do add value, is understanding the connective tissue across other departments and making sure they know what that value is, regardless of where we sit. Because if you look at professional services, we're running margin, we're running revenue, top line and bottom line, and I have some parts that are revenue generating, some parts that are cost center. And so, but the value is in having a unified content strategy, team approach, delivery model. And so I've really lobbied hard to not have us broken up, because once you start breaking up, you lose efficiency, you get redundancy, and you can't deploy with maximum impact. In my opinion, it's ideal the way we are. So we sat in P&T, now we're in professional services. As long as as long as the team doesn't get sliced and diced, it doesn't matter where I sit.
Yeah, that makes
That would be
sense.
yeah.
So you would say for you, the bigger thing is making sure that you don't want the team to be set up based off of the different phases of the customer lifecycle. Meaning today, you've managed to get the team centralized to at least focus on how do you support. Maybe, I don't know if you get involved pre-sale, but if it's pre-sale and new customer and beyond and all the way through renewal and champion phases and all the entire life cycle of the customer, it sounds like you've managed to centralize all of that work into one team today.
Yeah. From a product content perspective, we are in one team, and that's what I prefer. If I have my way, right? That's what I prefer, and that's what I try to drive. Now, when it isn't all consolidated under me, it's a matrixed situation for the same kinds of outcomes, because I'm just following best practices, right? Some of which I've picked up, some of which I helped develop along the way, and some of which are brand new and showing up, and that's what's really important. And so it doesn't matter how you're organized per se. It's making sure you have a content strategy and a content execution model that follows the customer lifecycle. And sometimes that's all of our content. Sometimes that's us plus others. Sometimes it's just others, right? But the net is you got to own that lifecycle, because the content impact is critical, really relative to where it shows up in the lifecycle. And if you don't have eyes on that, and somebody doesn't own that journey and have the metrics and sort of the optimization responsibility, you're going to be flying partly blind. You're going to be missing things. You might have redundancies, right? The inefficiency. So there has to be some sort of leadership over the top, whether it's consolidated or matrix. Consolidated is easier. As long as I can keep that rolling, I'm going to. But if I walked into a different situation and have been in different situations, there needs to be some kind of unified strategy and execution model across all teams.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So it's neat to think that your team is housed underneath professional services today. Maybe I just don't talk to enough people. I mean, we've talked to hundreds of people in the space over the last couple of years, and it is interesting. Professional services is rare that I see customer ed underneath professional services. Yeah. Why do you think that? Why do you think they decided to structure it that way initially?
Well, that's great. I think the other thing to know about Procore, we've been around a while. But the company was a startup for quite a while, and we've only been public for 4 years, I think now. So when you're not public, you don't have to be optimized organizationally. It's growth at all costs. There's a lot of bespoke for each customer, and it's about logo. Well, now we're in, generally speaking, that's a simplification, but now we're in, post IPO, we have to have operational efficiency. We have to have, some level of just really making sure that we're driving as efficient and maximum productivity as possible. So why were we moved into the professional services? I say that Procore is young and growing because professional services is only 4 or 5 years old. It's not like we have this fully grown up, fully baked, robust organization, and I'm just moving around. Things are still evolving and developing in a great way. We're growing. We're having a lot of success. We're beating the street, but there's still evolution going on. So I was put into professional services because there's a need for us to monetize the education business. And that's something I've done quite a bit, have built that out in other places. So it's kind of like there's going to be a piece that comes along that doesn't exactly fit, but where we sit, the bias is going to be on the part of the business that does make sense. And in professional services, content services was already a go-to-market play. Now we're bringing on an education and certification business, a monetized set of offerings, right? And I'd really kind of orchestrated a little bit myself. I talked to our leadership. I made sure they understand I could do that. I tested out whether or not there was an appetite for monetization. There's a lot of excitement. And so they pulled us all over. And I'm just bullish on, you can't split us up. We can allocate cost. We can not have hit the margin on the PS books, but just please don't break us up. And so far, so good. But that we got put in GPS because the opportunity for what I had to bring to the table and what we could do was big there. So that's why we're there. Who
Okay.
knows how long we'll stay? Or education, content rather, it gets moved around. It just does, right? Especially the education side, because sometimes when it's a profit center, it sits in services. So when I was at VMware and I was running a $54 million P&L myself as half the overall business, I sat in professional services, right? When I was at PeopleSoft a million years ago and had a, I don't know, $13 million P&L, whatever it was at the time, there was a hard line to operations, but a very strong dotted line to services. So monetization always intersects with services, and so that's, again, I'm giving you a longer answer
No,
than you need.
I love it. It's actually really helpful to think because I think for a lot of our listeners, a lot of the insight into where and how you might structure your customer education team is going to be dependent on your organizational goals, the impact you're trying to make, and also the maturity of the company. So
Yep.
Procore has moved from a startup into a very mature IPO based business. There's expectations and standards that are being driven by the organizational need that has led you to where you are today. I am curious on that front. So, like, when you say content, because content it can be a broad definition, and now
Right.
especially being under professional services, more importantly, content that is looking to be monetized. Like, how would you define content, and
Yeah.
maybe what content is most important? Like, where is your focus today on the type of content you're producing?
It's a really good question. It's a really important distinction because marketing does a lot of content, and
Right.
when they share a similar vocabulary, but the content, that's the content itself and the outcomes are different. And so when I say content, what I mean is product related content relative to implementation, optimization, and adoption. Okay, it's not about selling the product. It's not about making people aware of the product. It's not about, selling the company. It's about technical content that people need to configure it, roll it out, have people adopt it, and have the success that they need in terms of outcomes and metrics that we're helping them get to. So yeah, that's the content I mean. And in the life cycle, we do have content that gets pulled in when folks are prospecting, because we have a corpus of 5,000 knowledge base articles, 10 million page views a year just on our documentation, just on our support site. And people use it in all phases of the life cycle. But we've been iterating to sort of build for purpose content at each sort of point in the customer journey. So when I say content, I mean product content, documentation, education, in-app enablement content. Those are kind of the big three.
Okay, gotcha. So for you, when you think about the life cycle of the customer, then like, where do you start? Like, how do you think about this customer journey, and where do you spend most of your time?
We spend most of our time sort of in the sort of the middle, right? You've got interest, you've got awareness, interest, commitment, and then purchase, and then from purchase we go into implementation, onboarding, and adoption, and then ongoing success. Those are the three areas that I'm really focused. The implementation, I work with our professional services. They already have a lot of, they have services around that, but we have content that gets people ready to implement. Make sure that they have some baseline certification on competence with the system. They have the content they need to get ready to implement. And then when they're implementing and after the fact, there's still that content available for them to ramp up if they're going to add more, add another module, if they're going to, expand functionality, they're going to start a new project. They will always come back and consume the implementation content because it sets them up for success and potentially enables them to do things on their own. So that content is really critical. That's pretty standard SaaS education, pretty standard enterprise education. SaaS has actually taken down the curve of implementing, but that pre-production content is still very valuable.
So is that content more about like what help me understand what that content is about? Because you mentioned pre-implementation content that's really important. Like implementation content, I assume is like how to configure your account, how to add users, how to how to connect it to integrate to your other systems, that kind of stuff. But then you mentioned this kind of stuff that they're referring back to. Is this not like product specific training, but like kind of best practices or content? Like what do you mean by that? Help me understand a little bit more
Yeah,
about
yeah.
the goal of that type of content.
Yeah, for sure. It's product content. It's all product content. And the goal is to get an administrator or a person who has accountability for how the system is put together to get them what they need to set up like you said, a directory with people in it, build out a project. We do projects. Customers do projects. They build buildings, they build bridges, they build roads, they build housing developments. Those projects, when you set a project up, there's a certain amount of configuration that has to happen. Who are you? What are you doing? Who's going to work on it? What do they need to do? And then there are things like people have to upload and look at drawings. People have to upload and look at photos. People have to schedule and account for meetings. People have to do site inspections. People have to have OSHA certifications, right? So there's this whole host of things that need to happen when you're building something. And you need to configure Procore to do that, right? And projects may change how you're using the system. So my pre-implementation or implementation training is how do you do that? Not how do you upload a drawing, but how do you set the system up so that drawings can be uploaded in the way that you want them to?
I see.
And that's the bread and butter right there. Now downstream, there's use content, and I can talk about that enablement adoption. But that's really the sweet spot for the education play, where you have courses, certifications, just-in-time learning, right? Like you think about, bless their hearts, an Oracle University or a Salesforce Trailhead, or even any sort of enterprise software education, business or portfolio or catalog. That's what they're going to focus on. And that's what we focus on with courses and certifications.
Mostly because the people who are going to run and admin the system are going to be your most important contacts. If you can enable them, then they're going to be better able to enable everybody else in the org.
That's exactly right. Yeah, they're the one to many, and they are the one accountable for the success of the system in terms of how it's set up. So yeah, we have end users, we have content for end users, we intersect with end users in the application. End users come to our support site because every org's different. Some don't have a robust set of enablement, others do. Some people it's a simple use case, others complicated. So they do consume larger bits of content downstream, but what we try to do is get them a bulk of content that they need up front, get the outcomes they need, and then intersect with the users with as little content as possible downstream in the application. And so initially there's documentation, which is the sit down and read it, which some people like. There's courses and certifications, which people take. And all of that is at the service of getting people spun up to be able to implement this system and manage it. Then as we get into users actually using it, they do refer to the larger content depending on the company. But again, we try to get them in a place where they have just what they need just in time so they can just keep going. I call it the 3 just, but that's end user content, right? We kind of move in that direction.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense, and I think that's a common scenario we see, right? The people who are most likely to take your customer education are going to be the people who are responsible for the success of the application internally, and so that's where most of the time gets spent. I am curious if you were to poll that audience. And by the way, I mean, this is SaaS therapy, so I always like to pull back some layers here a little bit.
Sure.
But if you were to poll the audience of your admins, your customer admins, if they could change anything, right? Or if they would run into frustrations and pain points that they have, what do you think they would say? Like, what's the thing you hear most commonly from your customers? Because that's always one of the things I always want to understand is like, what kind of feedback do you hear from them around the approach you're having? What are the biggest gaps, essentially?
That's great. It's a great question. And I will say that it's pretty clear that construction is a digital adoption lagging market, right? There isn't this high-end adoption. So I think what they want is actually what we're leaning into and getting out the door. And that's, they want hands-on, they want use case and scenario based. And to the extent that we can give an opportunity to use their system for learning, those are the things that they want. Now we're launching a whole new set of courses with improved labs and hands-on sort of experience because we've needed that and we're going to get that out the door. But be honest with you, Todd, they just want more because customers are different. They use it differently. We have almost a 70% completion rate, which is super high for e-learning in the industry. I think, look at e-learning in general, it's like 38%, right?
That's
and
high, I would say. I think it's lower than that. I would say it's sub 30.
Yeah, it's low, right? And so we're almost, we're well above 2x of that, which is super cool, or just at 2x. But that's, so people need the content, they like the content, they consume the content, and we're lucky that way, right? And so it's more, can you tailor it to our situation? And in construction, we do very much still build the system out for their use cases. We don't unpack these vanilla sort of best practices. The system is a best practice in and of itself, but it needs to be molded based on what Meta's doing, right? What is Google doing in terms of data centers? And then what's the government doing on the FedRAMP side with the construction that they're doing, horizontal construction with roads and bridges and those kinds of things. So it does vary, and we do need to tailor the content more than I would, definitely more than at VMware or like an Oracle or whatever. And so that introduces an interesting level of complexity and a desire and a need to try and provide some level of customization, some level of built for purpose for different customer types. And so that's also an interesting challenge for me, because I'm used to saying one size fits all. Here's your configuration training, everybody go take it. Or implementation. It's a little bit more like, here's your implementation training for owners who do this stuff, for general contractors who do this stuff. So there's that. And I'm going on and on about this because it is a little different for Procore, and the customers are asking for things that I don't know that you'd get generally on the SaaS side anymore. So there is a little bit of that, right? Bespoke.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess obviously it shows my ignorance of the construction industry, but just the example of like building a data center is very different than building a bridge, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. That's a perfect example, though, right? It's very different. How you organize a project, what roles you have, what you're doing relative to how you're managing, and on the government side, that's still much more managed, controlled, right, regulated versus Meta building a data center. Now there are standards and all that, but it's just very different. And so the content challenge that I have is different than I've had. I haven't had this in quite a while because things kind of got standardized. But yeah, that does bring in some interesting challenges and fun challenges, to be honest with you. So I guess that's a long way to say that, yeah, people want more and they want it more personalized, and they also want the in-app stuff, which we've pivoted to over the last 3 years and are now delivering.
So, your team, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because this is one of the things I'm fascinated about is like, are you asked to wear multiple hats in your kind of content strategy as a whole, being part of professional services? And so what I mean is like, so when I think generally of professional services, a lot of times that's going to be like actual instructor-led training. You have a human involved doing hands-on labs and things like that. But like for you, are you just focused on like e-learning and course development and video production, or are you having to also interface with customers and provide personalized training for them at the same time? Like how do y'all approach and balance that?
Yeah, it's a great question. We do a little of both. And remember, we're evolving. We're very much evolving. And we came from professional services, which was not monetized, a number of years ago. And it was very flat. And along the way, though, that organization does do a lot of training, stand up in front of, customer training, and is kind of baked into how they deliver services. What I've been doing with that's customer facing, that's live. I've been really helping around the edges there with teaching best practices, some standardized templates and things like that. And so the stand-up stuff is a little bit of a lighter touch right now. And I'm building the front-end e-learning, all e-learning, leads to certification. But there will be a continuum where it goes from, here's your pre-implementation e-learning, you've gotten your basic certifications, now we're going to stand up and deliver content. And that's where the more bespoke stuff comes in. Hey, Meta, data center centric, let's talk about how you run your business. Let's talk about what you learned in the vanilla courses, and let's talk about the delta now and how you need to actually address what you're going to do in real life. And that's a nice continuum. And then you move into, okay, now that you've configured it this way, here's how we're going to drive adoption. But that middle section is when we get that bespoke customer-specific content delivered. And it's after they've taken the e-learning stuff. And it is largely stand-up or virtual. And what I'm trying to do, and I've been at Procore for 3 years, and there's always stuff to do. What I'm trying to do is move from, okay, we have this upfront content. How do we standardize the middle more? Yes, it's different for every customer, but what isn't different and what doesn't change? And how do we make that content development and customization lift as repeatable as possible and as scalable as possible? Because it is a services business, and we don't want to eat up time and cost. So.
Yeah, well, and I, one of the things that just the very first question that came to my mind when you were talking about being housed under professional services was the fact that, like, from an impact perspective and like metrics for your team, what are the things that the business expects out of you? Because is it literally just like, how much do you sell? And because like a lot of times when you think about content, I see a lot of organizations where it's like you're kind of barely making enough revenue from the services and from the like certifications or whatever just to kind of like cover the cost of your team, which like that's great. But so is it revenue generation directly from your actual services that they're looking for out of you and out of your team? Or is it something tangential, like, lead discovery or expansion opportunity or, things like that? Like, how do they actually look at your success metrics as a team?
Yeah, it's there are different lenses looking at different things. And so just to make sure that it's clear to folks, the org is in professional services, but not every team in my org is really serving professional services. The documentation team is serving the ecosystem and it's
Right.
not monetized. So we have to kind of ring fence that, or wall off that part of my organization because it doesn't contribute to margin, right? It shouldn't be on the books for margin, and the outcomes and the success metrics are very different. Right. However, the things that are monetized, they get looked at through a services lens. But as long as I have all of the product content under me, right, the product configuration, adoption, and enablement content under me, I want to keep the org together, because no matter where we sit, there's always going to be something that isn't in that lane completely. But from a content strategy, management, and delivery perspective, it's best to keep everybody together. So the way that we're looked at, for our monetized education that we built and we're going to continue to build and roll out, that's a services lens. It's about revenue and customers being successful, right? Your professional services standard metrics, right? It's going to be what's your revenue, what's your cost, what's your margin. We're not there yet with a full P&L, but I will build that over time, and I've run that. So that's where the courses and certifications kind of show up. When you look at product documentation, that's more about case deflection and driving down ticket volume, and that's what we're looking at right now, because we're still working with a fairly non-robust technology platform. We're actually turning on a new platform in October, brand new support site, where we'll have a little bit more granularity and a little bit more personalization. But right now we're just looking at, hey, what are the top tickets? How are they doing week over week? When are we getting content contributions there? And is it reducing the tickets? The other one we look at is when a customer clicks into the contact support and they're going to log a ticket, they also get a dynamic search bar that comes down with what they were looking for. And then they go to that content. And 98% of the time, customers will start filling out a ticket, and then they'll see the content and they'll go away and they won't come back. And there's a little bit of a blind spot, like where the heck did they go? But we do know that we do know, sort of directionally, that we are deflecting tickets because they don't complete the form. And so, so success metrics around documentation, it's consumption, it's ticket deflection, it's impact on ticket volume. And those are really the core metrics that we look at there. I've got, and then, underneath that, I own the technology and the operations too. Now, those aren't looked at through the same lens, but there's an important set of, sort of metrics and outcomes that they have to do to keep the stack up, to keep the content fresh, to keep our ecosystem served, keep go-to-market going. So that's the other thing. Like, I have a unified content business as well, content, non-business, business, and operations underneath it that supports it. You start every company's different, right? But you start breaking that up, you lose efficiency and you lose competence, because content is a different business. It's a different motion. And if you throw it over the wall to marketing, part of it to marketing, part of it to services, part of it to product, whatever, operations, you do lose the ability. It's inefficient for the organization, for the company. So my desire is always to keep it together and serve many masters. If you look downstream, so we got up front, it's, what about the docs? With education, it's one thing we look at is, are customers happy when they take education? Are they successful? And one of the big metrics that I look at is, are they likely to renew or expand with us after they've taken training? And it's 96% of the time they do. So I'm pretty happy with that metric. We'll close the cap and get it to 100, maybe. But I already know that our content is valuable because of our top trained customers. They renew and expand. I also know that we sell and close business every quarter where customers have taken education before they do that. And so that's another metric that isn't directly revenue related, but our customers renewing when they take education, our sales opportunities that involve education closing, what's that number look like? Are customers happy with Qualtrics? Are they telling us they're happy? And are our courses being consumed and growing in line with company growth? So those are some of the metrics on the education. Then if you look downstream, we provide content in app. It's in a side panel. It's in context. It's agentic AI driven. It uses my team's corpus of content as the large language model. And those metrics are really shared, because what we're trying to do there is we're trying to drive down churn by increasing time to adoption, by driving, time to implementation and success, number of users using versus number of potential users, and really higher level company metrics that we are a contributor to. But really, when you look at content in app, it's kind of the omission of action. If you were just going to look at content, did they read? Did they not go to the support site? Did they not get stuck? Did they read the content and keep going? Did they abandon the application? And these are things of these are negative outcomes that we want to see not happening, but we can't draw a straight line and say it's because of content. So my job is always going to be evangelizing, always be reminding people of the value, always making sure that people understand, why we matter in this particular frame for this particular leader with these particular outcomes. And it varies, right? Like I said up front, the education is different than the documentation, is different than the in-app. And that's important for me to know, because I'm responsible for making sure that people see us correctly and that we're also focused on the right things.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't know the job to be done, then you can end up identifying the wrong success metric for the wrong content type or the wrong activity, and set yourself up to basically ultimately feel like you're disappointing everyone. So I think that's a really good mindset there. I'm curious. You mentioned, we talked a lot about kind of like the admin onboarding and then like customer renewal, and there's enablement in the middle there. I'm curious, does your team look about and think about time to value much as a metric? Meaning like how long it takes between purchase and launch for a customer to actually go live?
Yeah, we're kind of obsessed with it.
Yeah.
But that's at the customer success level. And that's
That's why I was curious, because usually
yeah.
that's like an implementation or a customer success metric. And I was just curious if that bleeds over into you at all as something that you care about as a team.
It does. Like generally, I unpack my box of tricks, and one of them is we've got to have time to value, which means we have to have content at beta, and then content at GA, and then content at GA plus, whatever that is. And it starts with documentation, turns into videos, turns into courses, turns into certification. So that's just a best practice that I've followed for a long time. Beta, GA plus, 30, 60, 90, whatever you can get to. When we look at other with stakeholders, I think the most important thing is metrics that matter to them, and making sure that you understand and they understand the content impact, and selling that as much as possible, right? And so time to value is a big one. And one of the things on the customer success side is, have they set up a project within 30 days? If our customers don't set up a project within 30 days, it becomes much more unlikely that they'll ever set it up. And so these are metrics on the customer success side that there's have they added users? Have they, there are these milestones relative to actually using the system and having success in their project that we look at. And that's through the customer success lens. And it is time to value relative to actual work finished in the system. Set up your first project, added people to the directory, did your first ERP integration and closed your books, executed a change event and updated, sent out an updated RFI. These are things that matter meaningfully for adoption. And we look at them together because we have great leadership. I mean, our chief customer officer, Lyndon Hillebrand, is amazing, right? It goes all the way down to services and, down the line. And so
professional services reports up to the CCO, I'm assuming.
Yeah, exactly. And the CCO reports up to the CRO. We got more C's now than we know what to do with these days. But yeah, the chief customer officer reports to chief revenue officer. Professional services rolls into chief customer officer. So so when you look at it that way, we've got customer success, which has professional services in it. I'm under professional services, but they also have support and success and all that. It makes a little more sense that we're in professional services when you think about it, right? Because we roll up to customer success. And that way, all the content does contribute toward that. So maybe it helps people understand a little bit more, like, we're in professional services, but we're really in customer success. And so it's about it's more of an accounting exercise than it is like an organizational sort of best practice. So so we're obsessed with metrics of success with the product, and that's why this in-app content play, the giving customers just what they need just in time so they can just keep going, that's at the service of impacting those metrics. We want people to stay in the app. We want them to complete their tasks in the app. And then we want them to continue to have that success along the way. So we've been really focused, and this is not this is not specific to Procore. Everybody's doing this. How do we drive adoption with just the content that they need in context so that they can be successful? And we've been looking at that for 2.5 years, and we've had some really good success. We've driven down, and I don't have the metrics in front of me, but we've significantly impacted how long it takes people to set up a project. All the things I said, put people in a directory, get an RFI. These are all metrics that we've been impacting, and we're having a lot of success. They came in saying, we did this based on, we were seeing churn more than we wanted to. Customers were telling us it took too long to implement. There was, they told us on the one hand they need more training, and then on the other hand they say it takes too long to take it, right? So we've really tried to optimize the impact of content where they need it at the point that we need them to have the most success.
Yeah, it's funny. You don't know much about my own background, I guess, but when I first started my career, I was also in professional services, and we would do over like 200 training days a month with customers, just constantly, right? As far as so you'd have like a dozen trainers off every day with other customers constantly, and you'd always get feedback from doing live services. And what was also fascinating to me with any training is that the two most common pieces of feedback was it went too fast or it went too slow. So, you have
Right.
half the audience who feel like you're covering too much too quickly and they can't follow it, or there's the other half who's super bored who says that you didn't go fast enough, you didn't cover enough content, and it's just like, oh, come on, guys, what do you want us to do?
I mean, that's what you gotta, yeah.
Professional services for sure.
Yeah, no, you got to read between the lines, and you got to serve both, and you got to look at, that's the thing about content. I love my job. I've been in this lane for quite a while, but it's not easy because you're not the tip of the spear. You're not, you're not everything for everybody. But if we're not there, the company's not going to succeed. So and you've got to, and it's a constant process of trying to, evolve and optimize and also sell value and also make the right decisions, because not everybody's going to be happy. And, that's just, it's the generic way to say that's the nature of the job. But yeah, people who want less content, if you're hearing I want less and I want more, you probably need to segment your audience, right? A lot of times that's what that means. You're trying to one size fits all and you need two sizes or whatever. So, but that's the thing. We need more content. We need less content, like
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. So, I guess if you could change one thing about the approach that you're taking today, like what do you wish? Like if you had just had a pie in the sky dream of like, man, if I wish we could get here, like what would be your big thing that you wish you could change today?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I'm in the process of changing our curriculum to be a monetized, sort of subscription-based, more robust set of offerings. We have great offerings, but they are missing a couple of things like hands-on labs and some real exams. People like our content; it does work, but there's a little bit more built for purpose and also the ability to monetize. So that's a journey that we've been on, and it's going to take a while. If I could wave a wand, we'd have a nice portfolio of monetized, free to fee monetized classes that we could sell a subscription against, and we'd be able to have a regular P&L stood up. That's where I'm going anyway. That's what the company needs, and that's what I'm been tasked with making happen. It's just, it takes a while. It takes a while to go from free to fee. It takes a while to turn on a monetized business, and it takes longer than you think. Like any implementation, right? It takes twice as long and costs twice as much. Although I don't think the cost will be twice as much. But you know what I mean? Like, so otherwise, I think that yeah, I mean, there's also, and this is a double-edged sword, but the idea of AI generated learning content. There's what's hype and what's ripe. It's kind of like always the way I look at it. There's a lot of hype around AI. There's a lot of hype around AI and learning content. It's not ripe yet. If it's soft skills, you want to generate a podcast on, whatever, or you want to generate a talk, sort of an audio file on, HR training or whatever, AI is there. But if you want to stand up system training with modules and competencies and outcomes, it's not there yet. And so that would be another thing. And it's a double-edged sword because it also takes out work that needs to be done. We look at the drudgery, but that's something that I'm excited about because it also means that I can do more with everybody. But that would be another thing. If I could wave a wand, I'd get to ripe on AI driven learning content. For Doc, it's there too. We import our style guide, we put in content, we ask AI to match it. It does an okay job, we edit it, and we move it out. And that's something that we've been bringing online, which is really successful. But I want that on the learning side because it increases, because I've got a lot to do, and I only have a certain number of people. And so this is an application of AI where it would be really, really helpful for me. But it's just not quite there yet.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Man, Michael, this has been great. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights with me. Hopefully, it's been a fun conversation for everybody else listening in. I've really enjoyed this. Michael, the way we do our show, because it's therapy, right? We're always trying to understand what's working, what's not working, what do you like, what do you don't like. We've gotten to a little bit of that today, but the big question that I always like to ask people as we start to wrap up our conversations, it always comes down to one question for me, which is, because this is a therapy session, every good therapy session ends with a piece of homework. So if you could give our audience, our listeners, anybody else who's in a similar space as you, trying to figure out how to help more customers win, how to help build out their content teams, how to deliver resources to their stakeholders that are going to help everybody feel like they're going to be successful. If you could give one piece of homework to people, what would your assignment be for them to go forward with?
I think that, and this is a little bit more than what we were already talking about, there needs to be a strong content strategy that goes across the company. You need to bring in your content teams that are not just your own, but across the organization. And you need to have sort of a steering committee on what content is built by whom, everything shared, everything optimized, and how do you deploy it in the lifecycle. So having all of your content teams aligned on just efficiency and operation, but then also aligned on what content goes where to impact what outcomes. And even if you can't get everybody together as a content leader, you need to look at that life cycle from interest all the way through renewal. And what are the intersection points of content? What do customers need to be successful? And how do you get it to them? And because that's what I've been working on since I got here, and cracking open the in-app stuff where we drive the task-based content and we set up our metadata structure on content around that. We set up an LLM, really valuable, seeing amazing impact, right? Reducing churn, time to value, all sorts of really great things that we needed, we're seeing. But that's because we had a unified strategy. We had everybody at the table, and we architected what we're doing based on what we see as a customer journey and where we were falling over as a company. So that's a big piece of homework. If you can get everybody in the room, you get all your stakeholders, you get all your content teams, you unify, you execute, you manage, you steer and govern, that's ideal. However close you can get to that is probably the best thing I would have people do. And it starts with the framework of what your customer journey is and what content is needed where, and how do you do it, and how do you get it there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Man, Michael, thank you so much again for joining us today. And for being willing to come on the show. I don't know, you're in the trenches doing the good work every single day. But I don't know if you, how you care about people, if they would want to reach out to you. If someone wanted to pick your brain a little bit more, what's the best way for them to connect?
Hit me up on LinkedIn. I love talking to people. I'm happy to share what I know. I love learning what they know. Always interested in expanding the network and collaborating and helping and sharing with people. So they can hit me up on LinkedIn. They can connect, send me a message. They can say, hey, saw you on SaaS Therapy. Don't try to sell me stuff, everybody, because you will go to the other inbox, which is other messages. But if you're like, hey, I want to talk to you, I'm interested, I'm curious, I'd love to do it. Look forward to hearing from anybody out there.
Oh, so good. Michael, thank you again for joining us. And, good luck out there, everybody. And have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.